Hey now, Brawlers! Today we're going to take a look at Lost Legacy from AEG. Now you might be wondering, hey Nick, I thought you did a review of Lost Legacy already, and that doesn't look like Lost Legacy at all. Well, this is a new edition from AEG that dumps the old box and artwork of the original Japanese edition and releases it in their pouch format, which is what their version of Love Letter came in. And for those of you that don't know, the designer of both Love Letter and Lost Legacy was Seiji Kanai, and they are very, very similar games. Now, the thing about Lost Legacy is they didn't retheme it the way that they rethemed Love Letter. With Love Letter, they rethemed it to go into their Tempest series of games, a bunch of heavy Euro games, and this is like the light card game that tags along with them. So the re-theming was just the artwork. With Lost Legacy, the theme is mostly the same because there's not really a storyline to the game, or not really I guess there is, but in the original there was like really no storyline. It was just kind of crazy, or just fantasy characters looking for a spaceship. And same thing with this one. The artwork is very, very different, which you'll see in a moment. But the other significant difference is that this one is by itself. Then the original, I'm sorry, that sounds weird. The original Lost Legacy was actually 2 decks of cards. There was the main game of Lost Legacy and what they would call an expansion that just happened to be in the same box. So you could play as either of them as standalone with up to 4 players, or you could shuffle them all together and do up to 6 players, or still do between 2 and 4 players if you wanted to and just have more cards, as long as you only played with one of the Lost Legacy cards. This one is just one set of cards, so it's significantly different. Are you confused yet? I haven't really explained what the game actually is yet, but that's okay. It's a very simple game. We're going to do a brief overview of it, then we're going to come back. I'll let you know what I think about this new edition. Alright, I'm going to give you a very brief overview of Lost Legacy because it's a very brief game. This is a competitive game for 2 to 4 players if you have only the base version of the game, or I should say just one of the versions of the game. If you have multiple versions, which AEG will be releasing eventually, or which the original Japanese version of the game comes with, there's actually 2 versions in the same box of the original Japanese version, you can mix them together in order to play with up to 6 players, or you can just mix together multiple sets and play with less than that if you want, but having more cards enables you to play with up to potentially 6 players. But in any event, this is a competitive game, and the game is really broken down into 2 parts that play very, very differently. So I'm just going to walk you through very briefly how each of the different parts works, and then we're going to go back and actually look at what each of the different cards in the game does. So the first part of the game, and if you ever played Love Letter, it's the same. It's really the same thing. You're going to every player. You're going to shuffle up the deck. You're going to take one card out and you're going to put it off to the side, sideways like this, signifying that that is the ruins. If any other cards get added to the ruins, they're going to be put in order so that each player knows exactly the order in which they came out and which ones are different. Then, and these could all be moved around during the course of the game. Then, when you have this set up, each player is going to get 1 card from the deck, and then the game is going to begin. So you all start the game with 1 card. On your turn, you do these 2 things in this order every time. You draw a card from the deck, so you therefore have 2 cards in hand. Then you play 1 card. And when you play a card, that's a bad example. When you play a card, you're going to put it face up in front of you, and so that everyone can see all the cards that you have. If someone forces you to discard, it's the same thing as playing it. You're just going to leave it face up in front of you. And this is a rules reference card, by the way, that everyone can start with one of those. And play is going to continue like this. Play is going to continue until one of 2 different things happens. Either every player but one is eliminated from the game by the effects of the different cards that are in the deck, or until the deck runs out. When someone draws the last card from the deck, they finish their turn as normal. In other words, they have 2 cards in hand, they play a card, and then they end their turn. And at that point, we go into the second phase of the game. Assuming that more than one person is still in the game at this point, then we come into the investigation phase. And this is sort of the root of the game. In the investigation phase, you have 1 goal in order to win. And that is to find one particular card, which is called the Lost Legacy. The Lost Legacy is just like the little hot potato that you're trying to find throughout the course of the game, and I'll give a more detailed explanation of all these cards in a little bit. And in order to try and find it, you have to investigate and deduce where it is. So that whole first part of the game, other than trying to eliminate the other players, is trying to find out where this is. And it could be anywhere. It could be in the ruins, it could be in your own hand, it could be in someone else's hand. Hopefully you have some idea of where it is. And when you do, then it goes, you have to investigate in order. So everyone should have one who's still alive, should have one card remaining in hand that are numbered from 1 to 8. If you get stuck with a card that has an X up in the top corner, unfortunately that means you don't get to investigate and you're effectively eliminated. If more than one player has the same denomination of card in hand, those players don't get to investigate either. So if you have a unique number, starting with the low numbers going up high, those players get to investigate. First you'll say, does anybody have the 1? Does anybody have the 2? Does anybody have the 3? And so on. When your number gets called, you reveal the card that you have in hand, and you would choose either a player or your own hand or one of the cards in the ruins to investigate. Whatever card you investigate is revealed. If you're correct, if you've actually found the Lost Legacy, then congratulations, you have just won the game. If you're wrong, you have lost. It goes to the next player. And if none of the players manage to successfully find the Lost Legacy, which usually happens if there's a lot of cards in the ruins, then everybody loses. There is no winner. So that's really the game. That's the core of it. Now let's look at each of the different cards and their effects. All right, so each of the cards in the deck going in order. First, we have the Sister of Fate. There's only one of her in the deck. If this card is in your hand and is looked at by another player, you are eliminated. So it's bad to hold on to her for too long, but she gets to investigate first because she's the one during the investigation phase if it gets to that. The General, and there's only one of him, the General gets to look at the top card of the deck and exchange that card with your hand. Now, whenever you have the option of exchanging cards, either with a card in the ruins or with the top of the deck or with another player, you can secretly do that underneath the table. So you can take the cards underneath the table, kind of flip them around, hide them from the other players, so that way the other players don't know if you actually exchange the card or not. Only the player, if you're exchanging with the player, only that other player does. The Shadow Thief, you can look at another player's hand or any card in the ruins. If that card is a Lost Legacy, you win the game. So that's a way to win before you get to the investigation phase or eliminating everyone. The Swordsman, you can look at another player's hand. If that card is an X, the X effect is canceled and that player is eliminated. That will become more clear in a moment. And the Lost Legacy, the Starship, because there will be other Lost Legacies and other sets that have different names. This card cannot be played. This is the card that you need to investigate and find in order to win at the end of the game. Until then, until you get to that point, it's just a card in your hand that's dead weight, or a card out in the ruins that's just sitting there waiting to be found. The Old Map, and there's multiple versions of this in the deck. You can look at the top card of the deck and place it in the ruins. Then you may shuffle the ruins. The Search, you can look at any card in the ruins. You may exchange that card with your hand. Assault, look at another player's hand. You may exchange that card with your hand. And the X card for this set is Sneak Attack. If this card is in your hand and is looked at by another player, discard this card, you get the hand of that player, and that player is eliminated. But of course, as we saw before, other card effects could negate that. So those are each of the different cards. Those are all the different effects. Remember that the main phase of the game, you're just drawing a card, playing a card, hoping to eliminate the other players, or completely, or if it gets to the investigation phase, hoping you have a card that lets you investigate quickly in order to find the Lost Legacy. And that is Lost Legacy. Now, just for the hell of it, I thought I'd show you the old original version, the Japanese version of Lost Legacy, just so you can get an idea of what the different art style is. The gameplay is exactly the same. There is no difference whatsoever. It's just the art style and graphic design that's different. These cards are bilingual. So first, here's the box. And you can compare that to the pouch that the AEG edition of Lost Legacy comes in. They're trying to keep it sort of the same as its version of Love Letter. And here we have the number 1, which is the Girl of Fate instead of the Sister of Fate. The General, that's named the same. You see, these have more of an anime manga style, like a lot of Seiji Kanai's original games. The Female Thief, the awkwardly named Female Thief as opposed to Shadow Thief, so that was probably a better name change. Swordsman, the Lost Legacy, the Old Map, then they start to get much more abstract. Search, Assault, and the Sneak Attack. And there's also a promo character I figure I'll just show you now, which is the Princess, which is supposed to be an ode to the to the designer's previous game, Love Letter, and this actually matches the artwork of one of the promo cards for the original Japanese version of Love Letter. And the princess, the way I always play is you either just use it or you don't, or I guess you could replace one of the existing 8s with it, but there's really tiny English text here. It says, when this card is in your hand, it is indicated in the investigation phase, you win the game. So you could actually try and trick another player somehow into investigating your hands during the investigation phase, and you can win the game. So anyways, that's both versions of Love Letter. Just decide what graphic design and art style you like most, and if you enjoy the game, and pick that one up. So let's get to my final thoughts. Okay, so my final thoughts on Lost Legacy are going to be broken down into 2 parts. The first part is just going to be my opinion of the game itself, regardless of what edition we're talking about, in case you didn't see my opinion of the original edition, my other review. And then we're going to talk about what I think about this new edition from AEG. Now, as for what I think about the game, and actually I was interested to do this review not just because I wanted to see what the new edition was like, but I also wanted to see if my opinion about Lost Legacy had changed. And as it turns out, because I did play this new edition a few times, not too much. My opinion hasn't changed that much. And that is to say, it's a good game. I still think Love Letter is better. What it is, I mean, the game is mostly the same. That whole first part of the game is exactly the same as Love Letter, with just some different cards and different effects. It's nothing that you couldn't put into Love Letter with some expansions, right? But the whole thing rests on that investigation phase, of course. That's the key to the game. It's deduction. You're trying to find out where the Lost Legacy is. And while that's a very cool idea and concept, to me, it has always come off as a little bit clumsy. It's a little bit clumsy because of the fact that any good deduction game, it's going to be some amount of chance, and you have to work really, really hard to get perfect information. In this game, it is so random as to whether or not you're actually going to find out, even with a modicum of certainty, where the Lost Legacy is. And that's always kind of bothered me. We have been in no-win situations before where no one has won the game because it's been a random card in the ruins, where enough players have done the action where everything just gets shuffled around that no one has any information. It's somewhere in the ruins, and no one gets lucky and no one picks it. It's in nobody's hand, and you're just sunk. And that's a pretty bad feeling when nobody wins. Now, it sounds like I'm being horrifically vicious to this game, and I really don't mean to be, because it is fun. I mean, I do enjoy it. I'm just doing this as a comparison to Love Letter. If you've never played Love Letter, first off, where have you been in the last couple of years? But it's the same base mechanic, but it just feels tighter to me. It feels like it's a more controlled atmosphere. Even though there is definitely randomness to it, it just feels more like you can read your opponents. Lost Legacy feels more chaotic in a way that just is not as satisfying to me. So it's a different experience because of that investigation phase, but it makes me remember how much more I liked Love Letter. That's the best way I can think of to describe it. So at this point, I bust out Lost Legacy when I'm just looking for a change of pace from Love Letter, but Love Letter is still my go-to for just fast and easy games to teach people. And I know there's people that disagree with me on this. I know there's people who are like, I've got Lost Legacy, I will never touch Love Letter again. This surpasses it in every way. For whatever reason, I just disagree. I just think Lost Legacy is good and interesting, but not fantastic the way that Love Letter is. But okay, that's my thoughts on Lost Legacy if you didn't see my thoughts before. How it is with the AEG edition, here's what bothers me. So first off, I prefer the original Japanese art. I just do. I like, it's the same kind of art style that Seiji Kanai used for a lot of his original Japanese editions of the games, and I like it much, much more. Like, as soon as AEG released the original Japanese artwork version of Love Letter, I picked that up too. I don't always play with it because it's, I don't know, people seem to like the version that I have with the Countess instead, the original AEG version, but whatever, I like that I have it. And that's probably why I'm going to keep my original edition of Lost Legacy, because I prefer the artwork on that one. I just do, and I would prefer to play with that one. But look, that's different styles. I'm not saying that the artwork for the AEG version is bad, but I've seen it a million times. The artwork for the original Japanese artwork, while I have a lot of games that have sort of that Japanese manga feel, even this one is different. It just has this cool, like, watercolor almost feel. I don't know if that, or crayon feel. I don't know how to describe it, but it was just very neat. I really like the simplistic art style, and I just feel like I've seen these generic D&D characters a million times, so really enough already. So that's one complaint. Here's the other complaint. There is absolutely no reason they couldn't have included every card in here that was originally in the Japanese version of Lost Legacy, meaning the 2 sets of cards. If you don't know, what AEG is doing is that they're stringing out all these expansions and making them all separate, meaning that you're going to have to buy all those other cards in a separate expansion called like the Flying Garden expansion. And all they're doing is milking people for every single penny that they can. And I hate it. That's so aggravating to me. Why would you do that? They've released other games from Seiji Kanai even in their small box line of cards. They're called the Big in Japan line, that have more cards and actually have a box, not just a pouch. And they're charging like $14 for it. You know what? I would easily pay $14 or maybe even less if you go to Cool Stuff and have both sets of cards. But now you're giving people a chance to pay whatever, $6 to $7 for this one, and then they might not like it. So I don't think that they're going to make much more money by stringing people out and making, but the true fans who really want to pick this game up now have to be triple dipped by, which sounds dirty, by EGCs for these. So that really bothers me. By the way, as far as the pouch goes, I don't know. It's still awkward and inconvenient. It looks cool. It seems neat. But a box, I think, is still better in almost all cases. So that's a tiny complaint as well. So I'm a little underwhelmed. And by the way, they changed nothing with this edition. That would have been another opportunity for them to do something a little bit different. Maybe throw in at least a couple of promo cards that were different. They didn't even do that. So that kind of bothers me. But am I saying you shouldn't pick up the game? Well, it's kind of hard to get the original Japanese version of of Lost Legacy right now. see how similar they are. But having said that, so if you can't get the Japanese version, I do think the Lost Legacy is a good game. To me, it's not as good as Love Letter. I'd still rather play Love Letter. But it is interesting. If you did want Love Letter with more meat to it, even if it's random meat, then this might be worthwhile. It might be worth you checking out for sure, because it is a decent game. It is a fun game. I don't want to make it seem like it's not. Just not as good as Love Letter for me. And the AEG edition is not terrible. It's just not as good as it could have been. So it's certainly worth picking up. I know that's a very ambivalent review, but there you have it. I wish they would have just kept it simple, kept the art style, kept the box, and released all the cards that they should have. But we'll never know how that would have turned out. My name is Nick. This has been Board Game Brawl, and I'm reminding you to get out there and game every day in every way. Take care.